Check. Tuesday, October 15, 2019.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All members of the council are present.
Thank you. This was a new closed session.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. We have two items this evening. The first is a conference with legal counsel as a result of anticipated litigation due to the significant exposure to litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D2. We have one case to discuss. Next is a conference with legal counsel as a result of existing litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D1. We have one case to discuss. It's the matter of the City of Dana Point versus the Sunshine Group, also known as the Seaside Inn. Orange County Superior Court case number 3020170091590. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Then I'm going to go ahead and recess the City Council meeting until 6 p.m. Welcome to the Dana Point City Council meeting of October 15th, 2019. We will now reconvene our meeting. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilmember Lewis. Please remain standing for the invocation this evening. It will be provided by Orange County Sheriff's Department Chaplain Ray Thompson.
Good evening. Please place your hand over your heart and say with me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Council, staff, and guests, would you join me in prayer for the invocation? Father God, I thank you, Lord, that you are present daily. I thank you for the men and women that you have positioned, Lord, and given responsibility to. I pray that you would guide them, direct them, counsel them, give them your wisdom, Lord, as they navigate through the perils sometimes, Lord, and for the betterment of the good of many. Father, we ask that you would just watch over us all, Lord, that you would just continue to provide. And Lord, we thank you for the freedom that we all have the opportunity to live within. And we just ask this in your precious name. Amen.
Thank you. That brings us to presentations and proclamations. We have one presentation tonight by Lali Raphael from the U.S. Census Bureau. Can you please come up?
City Council members, staff, and the amazing people of Dana Point. My name is Lale Wafai. I'm a partnership specialist with United States Census Bureau. To accomplish an accurate census, 4 things must occur. We must establish where to count, motivate the people to respond, initiate operations to count the people, then we have to release the results of the census. Our mission for 2020 census is to count everyone once, only once, and in the right place. Why we do a census? Well, it is in our Constitution. Article 1, Section 2, right up in the front, mandates that every 10 years we cover the entire country and count everyone who lives in the United States. It is also our results every 10 years determine how our federal funding of over $675 billion are annually distributed down to the states and local communities and their vital programs. It is also about, determines how many seats each state receives in the House of Representatives. Here is the results from 2010 census, where it shows California was able to remain with 53 seats out of 435 seats in the House of Representatives. But for comparison, Texas gained 4 seats, while some states such as Ohio and New York each lost 2 seats. In August, we started our operation address canvassing, and we are nearly to completion of this operation, where we update our maps and basically review with the local databases to make sure we have all the addresses ready for our census in April 2020. In March 2020, we do our update leave, which is mainly what we do in the rural areas to count the people. And then service-based enumeration and group quarters enumeration are also done in March, where we count people who live in facilities such as nursing homes, correctional facilities, dormitories, everywhere where there are groups such as hospitals. Here is our timeline. So 95% of people will start receiving an invitation email on March 12th to self-respond to their surveys. This time, for the first time, people can go online and self-respond online. 1 April is basically the census day, is a day like a benchmark where we consider National Census Day. In April and May, we do our non-response follow-up. We basically send mail reminders, and then at the end, we will have an enumerator to go to the people's homes who have not responded to support them to respond to the surveys. So why are we here? We are here to ask you as trusted voices and the leaders of the city of Dana Point to pass on our messages. One important message that we like to share is that census is safe and is confidential. The results of census are required by law. We are governed by Title 13 US Code, where it doesn't allow us to share anyone's personal information with any other agency or even law enforcement or the President of the United States. We want people to know that, to feel safe to provide the information. Our data is only provided in numbers and statistical data. All US Census employees take a lifelong oath to protect people's personal information, and penalties for wrongful disclosures are very severe. We also want you to know that we have added 12 non-English languages to support our non-English communities. Those are Spanish, Chinese, Vietnamese, Korean, Russian, Arabic, Tagalog, Polish, French, Haitian, Portuguese, and Japanese. In addition to those, we have 59 non-English languages in form of language glossaries, language identification cards, and language guides. Online and over the phone, folks will be able to use these 12 languages. Paper form will only be in English and Spanish. So we are currently in our education awareness phase where we reach out to all cities and organizations, for-profit, nonprofit. We're trying to build those strong partnerships and relationships to be able to work together to raise awareness. As simple as it sounds, is a massive effort, and we need everyone's help to get everyone in your city counted. So what we find very effective is cities or even communities form what we call complete count committees to bring different sectors of a city or community together at one table to structure and focus and unify the outreach efforts. Those sectors or committee members should be experts in different areas such as education. Someone should represent your school, someone should represent your community organizations, your faith-based organizations, businesses, and so on. So it should usually be formed by the mayor or his or her designee or a prominent community leader. And then this is what the table look like. They basically meet regularly to be able to collaborate and work together to do a unified and structured outreach within their communities. So here is a map that we use, is our response outreach area map. It's based on 2010 census and also our American Communities Survey 5-year estimates. The bluer the colors, it shows the areas that we are estimating to have a low response score. So if we zoom into Dana Point, it shows some areas that have 20% of low response score, which means 1/5 of the population of Dana Point will not respond to their survey and will not be counted. Now you can just imagine how much funding, how much representations this community will be missing on for the next 10 years every year. There was a survey done by George Washington University that shows for each person who is not counted for each census, the city loses on thousands of dollars every year. Thank you. I also received this map from Orange County Complete Count Committee. Orange County Complete Count Committee was formed end of last year, and they are about 200 members strong. Many cities have decided to join this Complete Count Committee to work together to find out where hard to count areas are, to be able to reach out to those specific areas. And Dana Point was one of the cities that the census that shows in South County that has hard to count population. So I'd like to also say the state of California has formed a complete count commission. Orange County has one. We have many cities such as Irvine, Huntington Beach, Santa Ana, Anaheim that have formed their own complete count committees as well. We have community-based complete count committees such as veterans getting ready to have their own complete count committees, or many ethnic groups that have the complete count committees. So here is what we consider as or identify as hard to count populations. There are veterans, homeless people, children, especially those under 5, seniors, people with disabilities, and all minorities, such as foreign-born or immigrant populations, those who don't speak English, refugees, LGBTQ communities, farmers. So basically, most minorities are hard to count. And we are also hiring. So we have hired thousands of people so far. We have opened 2 offices in Orange County, area census offices, one in city of Fullerton, one in city of Santa Ana. We are focusing on hiring thousands more. I believe in Orange County alone, we're hiring over 3,000 people more. We still have to staff those offices. We have many different jobs. Clerk jobs starts with $15. People out in the field, enumerators, is $19 something, close to $20. But we also have supervisory position, IT positions, you name it. So I would like to encourage everyone to visit our site or post this flyer on your websites, organizations' websites, for your community to see and visit our website to see all the jobs that we have available. Everybody have to apply online. Qualification is to be 18 years of older or getting ready to turn 18. Be able to drive. Most of jobs requires that. Be a U.S. citizen and pass a criminal background check. So next steps are, please help us and help your community to generate readiness for the 2020 census, and mobilize your community to form or join our complete count committees. Invite us, please, to present at your network meetings, at any events that you have in your city or for your organizations. We love to be everywhere. Our team in Orange County are about 14 partnership specialists strong, and we have many recruiting assistants who usually love to be at the events and promote our jobs. We like to raise awareness about the upcoming census and be able to get a complete and accurate count, and then help us to promote our jobs and recruit for a diverse staff for ACOs. This is for my presentation. Again, my name is Lale Wafai, and here's my information. If anyone here believes that I could visit them or connect with them to, or their organization would benefit from this presentation, I'll be more than happy to connect. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wafai. Mr. Denny, could you reach out and coordinate with the U.S. Census on this and possibly get it onto our website to let people know that they are hiring and they're looking for people in our area? Yes, sir. Absolutely.
That would be great. We have an activity list for outreach that I can share. And then organization cities usually can elect the activities that they find suitable for the city or for the community and organization. And I will be more than happy to support you with anything you need to perform those. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much for coming out this evening and keeping us
Thank you.
informed. Okay, that brings us to, that's the end of our presentations. We have reading of ordinance titles. Madam Clerk, are there any ordinance titles to read this evening?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I have one introduction and first reading. It's for item number 13, and it's entitled, "An Ordinance of the City Council of the City of Dana Point, California, amending Chapter 2.08.098 of the Dana Point Municipal Code." Thank you.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the consent calendar. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine and all will be enacted by one roll call vote. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the city council, the public, or staff request specific items to be removed from the consent calendar for separate action. Are there any items to be removed by the public?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. By staff?
No, sir.
Thank you. By council? Oops. There you go. Ms. Lewis.
Yes, number 8, please.
8. Okay, do I have a motion for the balance?
I move the balance.
Oops, hold on. Why didn't you come on? Their mics aren't turning on. On the wrong one?
Oh, it's this one.
What's that?
Right on.
They're not coming on? Let me try this. Hold on. Okay. Mr. White.
I move the balance. Second.
Thank you very much. We have a motion and a second. Any opposition? Hearing none, that passes unanimously. Brings us to item 8. Mr. Denny, do we have a staff report?
Yes, Matt Sanacori's got your staff report tonight. Matt?
You're on.
Sorry, I was just waiting for the presentation to get up on the screen for everybody. Good evening, council. Good to see you this evening. I'm going to walk you through a high-level presentation. The staff report's 79 pages. I could be here for a long time if I went through that whole thing. So I'll walk you through a high-level presentation tonight and then turn it back over to you for questions. So the Rural 28 program is ultimately a program that's funded by 3 utilities in the state of California that allows cities to get credits for undergrounding utilities. Right now, Dana Point has about $1.8 million in credits. I assume, let me hold up a second. I think you guys can't see it on your screens, correct? Is that good? Okay. So what this slide talks about is it's a program to underground utilities. There's 1.8 million in credits, and it's funded by Pacific Gas and Electric, Southern California Edison, and San Diego Gas and Electric. Ultimately, the program, the Rural 28 program, maybe not focused on the right side of this slide, but on the left side, the intention is that it eliminates an unusually heavy concentration of overhead utility lines, involves a street or road with a high volume of public traffic, benefits a civic or public recreation area or area of unusual scenic interest. Those are designated in our municipal code, and be listed as an arterial street or major collector as defined in the Governor's Office of Planning and Research. Those criteria are pretty hard to meet. I'll talk more about that in a second. Also, this subcommittee sunsetted in about 2005, 6, right in there. But prior to that, the subcommittee in the 90s did put a list together. That list is on the right side of this slide. And ultimately, it took criteria for comparing streets and projects, looking at aesthetic benefit, benefit to the general public, civic recreation or scenic benefit again, and benefit from coordination with city projects. Basically, the list on the right is the list that was generated. The next slide will talk about Project 1 and Project 4 on that list have been done to date. The next two projects that would ultimately be in line based on this list would be Golden Lantern between Silver Road and Pacific Coast Highway. If anyone drives down Golden Lantern, you know there's a lot of overhead utilities on Golden Lantern. Same thing with Stonehill headed for the freeway below Golden Lantern, a lot of utilities on that roadway. This last slide that I'll touch on in this high-level summary is just the list of projects to date. The last one we did is that bottom project on Camino Capistrano and Capo Beach. That was done in roughly 2002 to 2004. And at that time, that project was 2.4 million. You try to do that project today, it's probably more like $4 to $5 million to do that project. So costs have climbed in this area. And at this point, we don't have good cost estimates for any of the other projects on the list. That is all I have for you. If I'm available for questions, thank you.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment? That's the mic on.
No,
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Hit mic on with it now. Okay, I'll bring it back to council. Do we have a motion for this item? What's this? Do you have a motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion to, what do we accept? and
Staff
file?
recommendation. I think it's a receive and file.
Receive and file.
Is that correct? Rule 20 prior activities. Yes, it's a receive and file. I'll go ahead and second that. And I'll bring it back for discussion. Ms. Lewis.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Senatore, I have a couple questions. So I know Laguna Beach was doing some undergrounding on PCH. And when I spoke with them, one of the things they did was they went around and they bought credits that were available. So is that something that Dana Point has looked into or can look into?
That is available to the city council if ever desired. We have not actually asked the question of other cities for credits at this time.
And so how do we do that? Agendize it, and we would have to agendize it and ask that the city go and see what credits are available?
Certainly something that should be discussed at a budget time, either mid-year or when we renew the budget and look at available financing and whether or not you want to apply some of the available financing to something like a purchase of credits, then we can start to explore that.
Okay, yeah, they told me they were able to get credits for like 50 cents, 40 cents on the dollar from cities that weren't using their credits. So something to explore. Also, so some of the streets that I think people would consider to be arterial or, big streets weren't on this list, like Via California. I see La Cresta is there, but not all of La Cresta, and some other streets. How do we go about making that determination if we're in a neighborhood that our street can be on this list of arterial or, high traffic?
So this list was generated in the 90s before I got here.
Okay.
I got here in 2001.
Okay,
I think the way the council could approach that if desired is that the subcommittee could reassemble, because right now that subcommittee doesn't exist. And if the council desires that list to be updated, certainly that could happen at the council's direction.
okay, great. So that's something I'd like to see done. How do we go about reconvening that subcommittee, or do we need a subcommittee? Can we just direct staff to update this list? What would be the process?
I think we'd need to talk at a staff level to talk about what type of volume of staff time we're talking about, because it is, if you read through the materials, a pretty comprehensive analysis starting on page 7 through pages
Pages many?
yes.
Okay.
Trying to get you a number through page 22 or 23, excuse me. So so it's a pretty comprehensive process. I'd need to talk with Matt about what that would look like and what a process might look like to solicit folks inputting in what facilities they'd like to be processed and prioritized, and then we could bring that back to the council.
Okay, that would be great, because I know this is a hot topic, certainly in my neighborhood. I think there's probably other neighborhoods where this is a topic and this list appears quite out of date. So if we could, and if it's a subcommittee here, what would we agendize that and have council appoint a subcommittee after you bring this back and staff has talked about it?
It depends. If you wanted staff to do it at a staff level, we could do that. Or if you wanted to appoint a committee of community members to do it, obviously that's going to take more time and more money because of training.
Oh, okay. Well, why don't you guys bring back what you're going to bring back, make some recommendations, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, if that's the pleasure of the council, absolutely.
What do you think?
So I think one of the things we need to take into consideration is when we do undergrounding, people don't really realize that it's the residents' responsibility to connect from the house to the street. I think staff should bring back what the estimated costs are to the individual homeowners, because that'll definitely have an impact on what people are willing to do and not do. But I also think that because we have a list right now that we haven't even addressed yet, are you asking us to throw this list away and start over? I mean, there's a lot of work done on this, or is this a list that we should try to accomplish first and move on? I guess I'm asking the question you missed.
Oh, okay. I thought you were asking the staff. Well, for my
The
part,
question about the list. So, I mean,
Oh.
we have a list that we're not even close to completing. And are we going to spend more staff time making this list longer, or what are you asking for us to
well,
do?
I guess I'm saying if this list is from 1999, prior to Matt even getting here, there might be other streets that even are higher priority. So we don't know until we get a better list, and then we can prioritize. So, I mean, I would be willing to spend some time going through that. But I think the first thing to do is find out what's involved in the process, explain that to people. And I know that neighbors can get together and form some sort of group to bury their wires, even if there's not enough money to have it all paid for. So, I mean, just the options out there, how we determine what streets would be what priority and how much it would cost, at least would start answering people's questions about how do they get these lines buried.
I think Matt may have some additional information about other segments that were analyzed previously.
Yeah, I think I would just offer the council that I would feel pretty strongly, having read the materials, that there's going to be very few additional streets you would add to this list that would be higher priority than those two major arterials that carry all that traffic. That's going to be the big driver for 20A, is that it's of public benefit and carries a lot of traffic. Golden Lantern and Stonehill, we all know, are your busiest streets out here, minus PCH, right, which is already done. So again, if you add a Via California or add one of those collectors, it's going to fall down lower on that list. So to the mayor's point, we may be working on those other two projects first anyway. So then we'd have to ask if it's worth the time right now, I guess.
And would you anticipate that we would have to buy credits to even contemplate doing those streets? Because I think, what do we have, about 1.2 million?
Yeah, we have 1.8.
1.8 million.
The city manager and I discussed that this afternoon, and it's pretty likely that we're probably about half what one of those streets would take to get done. It's probably more like a $4 million project. I mean, Camino Cap alone from Estrella to the city limit of San Clemente cost $2.4 million in 2002. I mean, that's almost, 15, 16 years ago. Costs have escalated severely. But also to your point with resident connections, I mean, you're talking tens of thousands of dollars per homeowner. That's generally what those numbers will be. We can get some current data on that. I don't have that today.
I mean, I think, and I don't want to discount what Ms. Lewis is saying, because I think everybody would like to see their individual streets undergrounded. However, we do have priorities on what needs to go first. I think you outlined those very well. I think it'd be a better idea to take a look at are we going to spend a lot of staff resources when we know what the priority list is right now for the big arterials that have to get done that we don't have money for right now? And are we going to budget money to do those? But I think we also have to do a lot of outreach and let people understand what the true cost is to them individually if you do connect.
And if I may, Mr. Mayor, as you know, there's been a lot of effort in Doheny Village planning, and including public infrastructure planning, and we will be coming back to you with some recommendations. You now have a capital investment account set aside between that and the Lantern Village assessment fees. You've got approximately $6 million set aside. When we come back with those recommendations for Doheny Village, you may at that point decide whether or not you want to supplement any of the funding to 20A and direct us to look at any of the priority areas and or evaluate any additional areas through this criteria to see if they score higher or lower than that criteria.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, could I also add just one more thing? The important thing with those two arterials too is they were paved in about 2007, 2008. They're about 10 years old now. They're going to hit their useful life at 20, 25 years. If the council desires to move on those projects, it would be best to do that before we rehab those in 10 years from now. And trust me, these projects take forever to accomplish. It'd be a 5-year venture just for us to accomplish it. So just one more thing for the council to consider is you don't want to go repave those streets and then slice them up with a bunch of utility trenches.
Are you sure?
Want to add that.
Oh, why wouldn't we want to do that?
So are you saying that when we do some street maintenance, it's the time to look into possible undergrounding on those streets?
That would be true if the funding's available,
The
yes.
funding's available, or at least if there is some funding available, and then if residents want to kick in funding for theirs, we should at least have a mechanism for them to do that, explain the mechanism to do that and coordinate with the city if they want to pay, how to coordinate with the city for their streets. So if we could talk about all that when you bring that back.
And that is part of the project rating criteria is coordination with other city projects.
Okay, and with residents who want to make this one of their projects as well. And when do we anticipate that'll be back here?
Doheny Village, we're going to be talking about with the council likely in December. And so we can certainly, include that as part of that conversation.
Are any streets being paved right now that would be on this list so that we could be talking about that before those streets get done?
I just looked at the list and right now in the current budget,
Uh-huh.
I don't believe any of those streets are on there, but I will verify that.
Okay, because I know Via California, I think, is one of those streets that's getting a big overhaul. And maybe that would be something that could be undergrounded at this time.
We would have needed to start planning that about 5 years ago, is what Matt said earlier. So we're literally paving today, Matt,
Okay,
Tomorrow and Thursday.
tomorrow and Thursday.
so you're saying it's 5 years to plan to underground before you can do it?
We
Approximately.
may be able to beat that, but just having done a few of them back when we did these, it takes an inordinate amount of time and coordination. Remember, you're working with 3 or 4 utility companies and they don't move fast.
Okay,
So that's
And
the
you're
challenge.
having to do specific design plans to connect to every single utility connection. So be it a house, a business, or a public utility connection, meaning a street signal or something else.
okay.
Right.
Thanks.
Mr. Federico.
I just wanted to say that it's been sort of lost in the discussion. On the city's website, the city does have information for residents and neighbors who don't live on major arterials, who might want to consider doing it in their neighborhood by pooling together and doing a voluntary assessment zone. Is that the right terminology? Assessment district. Thank you, Matt. And people can get it done in their own neighborhoods if they want to, but they've got to pool together. The information is there on the website. And I've talked to the staff before. They're very knowledgeable and can answer questions if people call.
All right, thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. I was going to ask staff to explain that, but you took care of that for me. Ms. Lewis.
Yeah, you said on the website, what website? City website, the SDG&E city website?
City website.
So how would people find that? Because I gotta say, the city website's not the easiest thing to use.
It would be just in the search engine, type utility undergrounding, and it pops right up to the page.
Okay.
Mr. McSork.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Sinacori, I know you mentioned it during your staff report. You said on this list, there were a few that have been completed. Could you tell me which ones those are again?
It would be Project 1 and Project 4.
Project 1 and 4 of the 12 have been completed?
Yes.
Okay. And, okay, so I see this list was established in 1996. So these projects are few and far between. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, we went into the red on the last project with SDG&E, and it took a while to recover from that Camino Cap project, and those projects done in the late 90s and early into 2003-04. So we finally are at about 1.8 million in credits, but it took us a while to build back up because you only get about $200,000 a year is about what they give in credits.
Okay, so even if we didn't redo the list, if we just stuck with this list, we're really looking at maybe picking one of these, and the 1.8 million in credits that we have won't even cover the cost of one of these right now. Is that correct?
We don't have a current estimate, but we believe that it won't come close to probably half of what you need to accomplish the project. But we could definitely do some work and verify what that cost would be for one of those projects.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Corey.
Okay, this is a receive and file item. So I believe we're finished discussing this. We're going to go ahead and receive and file that. And that brings us to public comments. There will be a 3-minute time limit per person and an overall time limit of 30 minutes for this public comments portion of the agenda. At the mayor's discretion, the balance of public comments will be heard after the new business portion of the agenda. All comments are to be directed to the city council and should not consist of any personal attacks. Members of the public are expected to maintain a professional, courteous decorum during their comments. State law prohibits the city council from taking action on a specific item unless it appears on the posted agenda. The city clerk will distribute any handouts you may have. Please state your name and city of residence for the record. We have one comment tonight. Wayne Yost.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council, members of staff, members of our community. My name is Wayne Yost, and I am proud to say that today, October 15th, my family and I have become 37-year residents of our wonderful city of Dana Point, and we've loved every minute of it. I just wanted to deviate for one moment, with your permission, from the comments that I listed on the guest speaker list. I met with Lila from the Department of Census about 3 weeks ago at an Orange County Regional Veterans Affair meeting. And she asked permission for her to send some representatives to our VFW meeting this past Tuesday. They gave a very similar presentation, and we did have numerous members of our Veterans of Foreign Wars sign up to assist the Bureau of Census in taking a census. So I would encourage other members of our community to also respond to this request. These are decent paying jobs. They are not full-time jobs for the most part. They're part-time jobs, and you'll definitely perform a service to your community and to your country. Getting on to the remarks that I'd like to make. This past Saturday, the Sunrise Rotary Club, in conjunction with the city of Dana Point, put on Lobster Fest, and it's an annual event. It's a major fundraiser for the Rotary Club, and we had a fantastic turnout. It was a lot of work, but we were glad to do it, and I was glad that our community responded in kind. We also had numerous guests that responded from other communities around Dana Point, so it was nice to see that we have others from outside our community coming in to participate in our community events. And I did want to thank the city, especially Mike Killebrew, who put in probably about 35 or 40 hours this past weekend to make this thing a success. Our Recreation and Parks Department, which also assisted. So thanks to all that participated in this event to make it successful. Moving forward in 2 weeks from now, on Friday, the 25th, the City of Dana Point, in conjunction with our police services and the Veterans of Foreign Wars, will be putting on a Spooktacular, which is a Halloween event at the Dana Point Community Center on Del Obispo. It's open to the entire public. We encourage that everybody bring their kids, wear costumes. That includes the adults and any also participating people. The sheriffs will be having an adjutant as far as a trunk or treat. Well, they'll have their police vehicles, with your permission, where they'll have their police vehicles there to hand out treats to the kids. There'll be games, awards for costumes, and it'll be a lot of fun. So please come and attend. It's Friday the 25th from 4:30 till 7 p.m. at the community center. The day after that, the Seroptimus Society is going to be holding a craft fair at the on San Juan Avenue at the Dana Point Community House, which I believe also is the Masonic Lodge. That will be from 10 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon. We will be having a barbecue there, and there are approximately 50 vendors with various crafts being represented also. And once again, thanks to the City of Dana Point for all your support.
Thank you, Mr. Yost. Do we have any additional comments, public comments?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Did you fill out a speaker slip?
Oh, I did not.
Go ahead and we'll have you fill one out when you're done.
My name's Ross Como. I'm a 20-year resident of Dana Point. I was actually here just to express my concern for what I understand is a potential deviation in the height restrictions for building along Del Prado and PCH. My understanding is that they're asking for a deviation to a plan that took 8 years to develop, with many different professional entities providing advisory capacities and input into this plan that is now enacted. And it seems that we've come to some type of rush to judgment on changing that. And I don't know why that's happening without the same type of studies that were done on the previous development plan that was approved. Thanks.
Thank you. Can you go ahead and fill out a speaker slip for us?
Yes, will do.
All right, Madam Clerk, any additional speakers? That's it. Okay, I'll go ahead and close the public comments and brings us to the public hearings. We have one item this evening, item 9, Tourism Business Improvement District Renewal for January 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2020, and public meeting on the establishment of the Dana Point Tourism Business Improvement District. Mr. Denny, you have staff report.
Yes, sir. Kelly Renders has your staff report tonight.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Tonight, we ask that you open the public hearing and consider the renewal for the Tourism Business Improvement District formed under the Parking and Business Improvement Area Law of 1989, continuing the program and the assessments from January 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2020. We also ask that the council allow public testimony on the formation of the DPT bid. Although no action is required by the City Council this evening for the DPT bid, the DPT bid establishment will be considered during a public hearing at your next regular meeting on November 5th. Mr. Pullen is here representing the Monarch Beach Resort, and Johnny Westham from Visit Dana Point are also here. We're available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Renders. Do we have any questions from the council on this? Just none at this time. Okay, I'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments?
No, we don't. Thank
All
you,
right,
Mr.
we'll go
Mayor.
ahead and close the public hearing. I'll call for a motion on the item. No motion. Go ahead, Mr. Wyatt.
I move the recommended action.
Okay, Mr. Federico.
Second, the recommended action as written.
Okay, I'll bring it back for council discussion. Let's see here. Off. Do we have anybody want to start on this? Nobody? Okay, well, I have some questions. So I'm looking on the first page about the discussion, and it says long-term contracts for group business can be secured. I don't know what page this is actually, on page 3. I don't know if you see that. And I guess my question is, why couldn't you secure long-term business without a 5-year T-bid?
Well, as you know, under the 1989 law, the TBID requires a annual approval from the city council. So given the uncertainty of whether the TBID could be approved more than 1 year ahead, there is less certainty for groups wanting to conduct business, group business with the TBID, knowing that perhaps the TBID may not get a renewal the following year. And if they're booking, 2, 3 years, 4 years out, there's less certainty.
Okay, so when you say groups to me, I'm assuming like large groups, like business groups that come out for their conferences and
Correct.
things. So I guess I'm a little confused on the resort still exists. Why couldn't they sign a long-term contract without the TBID?
Well, I think that there is group business that encompasses more than one resort. We have some conferences that can be whole city buyouts that drive benefits through Visit Dana Point for booking their group business here.
Okay, Mr. Weston's here. Why don't you go ahead and I'm a little confused on that one because
Totally.
the resorts exist, those conferences will continue to exist. I don't know why.
So Visit Dana Point has promotions and programs in place that supplements additional commissions to meeting planners for booking meetings into those resorts. So those are contracts that are with Visit Dana Point and the city, and the resort, and sometimes with the meeting planner itself. So if this organization dissolved, the hotels then would be responsible for those additional commissions, which in some cases could be, tens of thousands of dollars.
Okay. All right. What else do I have in here? I love these new toys. I just can't figure out how to make them work. Where else was I? Okay. Any other questions from council? Mr. Vixor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll ask a question. I'll direct it to Mr. Weston. I'm aware that we received a petition to form the Dana Point TBID from 5 of the 11 proposed hotels that will be a part of this. We also got 1 letter in opposition. That leaves 5 that we haven't heard from. This is the second time we've had this and none of them have showed up. But my question for you is, have you had any contact with them, or do you know what their position is on the formation of this TBID?
Absolutely, yeah. So I actually spent the last year meeting with each of those hotels individually. I met with them on phone calls, emails, and in person, doing site visits of their hotels, getting a better understanding of what their goals and objectives were, so we could then translate how the TBID could help their properties increase their visibility or occupancy or ADR and whatnot. The hotel that has pushed back has expressed their disinterest in the TBID, but in the letter that they sent, I believe they also aired out some other grievances amongst the travel industry in general. And I think that's just a position that they're taking regardless of this action here. The other hotels are interested in the TBID. They have had questions from me, which I've then provided them some detailed reports on what we were able to accomplish for them in our current structure, where we were able to include them in certain promotions that were complying with our current contract and our current agreement, but then also showed some additional value that could paint a picture for what the next generation of this TBID would look like. So there has been no expressed opposition directly to me, but this is why we did the petition drive, so they have the opportunity to show up at council or send in the letters to the city, either approving or opposing the formation.
Okay, and I realize you don't speak for them,
No, I don't speak.
but you have had contact with them, and we obviously have informed them of these hearings. I'm curious as to why we don't have any input from them one way or another. And along the lines of just with the formation of the TBID and the understanding of how it's set up and how many board members there are and how those seats are allotted, it's curious to me that we haven't heard from any of those entities. So I would simply, if they're listening, I would encourage them. I would be interested to know what their positions are on those issues.
And I have to send emails to them, letting them know about tonight's meeting and the meeting on the 17th of last month and next month's meeting as well. So I have been in good contact with them to try to get them to show up or have some sort of input in the formation here. But coming from two other districts, previously in Sonoma and before that in Palm Springs, where we developed 2 different T-bids, this is not uncommon for the hoteliers not to participate, whether they are, outside the market and investing in Dana Point by owning these hotels, or if they just don't have interest in attending.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Hold on here. There's too many mics open. You're not showing up. So Miss Lewis.
Hi. I just have, I just want to reaffirm, the money in the T-bid, that's all hotels money, right? It's not, comes from the city
Correct.
taxpayers. So this is all money the various hotels collect and put aside to market. Is that correct?
Mhm.
Thank you. I just wanted to affirm that.
All right. Well, seeing no further questions, I'll go ahead and take a vote on this item. I think this one is just to approve the 1-year T-bid. Is that correct? Okay. 6 months. 6 months. Okay. I'll go ahead and call for the vote. All right, that vote passes unanimously. Congratulations, and thanks for all your input, Mr. Western. And thanks for your work on this, Ms. Renders and staff. That brings us to our next item, item number 10. The proposed city council sponsored initiative, RE Town Center. I guess I'm doing the staff report on that. Okay. So this was something that was brought up by the Chamber of Commerce. It's something that's been discussed for over the last year, maybe 2, about some issues that are going on with building heights, concerns from residents about how the mass of the buildings, the flat roofs. And so they asked us to go ahead and consider putting this on so we can change from an 18-foot ceiling height to a 14-foot ceiling height, which will ultimately allow the architects a larger palette to design some more architecturally interesting buildings without changing, anything else in those regards. So I agreed to bring that up at the last meeting. The council discussed it, decided that we would take a look at moving forward on this and bring it back this meeting with a sample ordinance that we could approve or at least vote on and decide if we're going to move forward. So with that, that's my report. Ms. Ward, do we have any public speaking? Or I'll entertain a motion on this before we open the public comments. Hold on here. Now I gotta get back. Okay, there's no motion on this. Well, I will go ahead and move the item for discussion. Any second? Well, it'll die early then. We'll get out here. Mr. Feder, oh, okay, Miss.
Seconded for discussion. Did you call him?
Well, either one.
Oh,
His mic came on first, so. Mr. Federico.
There's a lot of recommended action here. I'll
Right.
second the motion as written.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, second.
All right, for discussion. Okay. All right, I'll go ahead and open public comments. Ms. Ward. Thank you. We have one public comment this evening, Jim Miller.
Good evening, everybody. Mayor, council. As you know, I was the member of the Town Center Subcommittee, and I really can't support the proposal as it is submitted tonight. A lot of time was spent on this topic, and it was to create a retail space that makes our town very unique. But the bigger reasons is this is just a Band-Aid approach to fix the bigger problem, I believe, with Town Center. As a member of the Town Center Subcommittee, our vision was to see individual lots being developed to create unique buildings that reflect the character of our city. If you're planning on spending $85,000, I may suggest you you do more than just look at the retail heights of the first floor. I would suggest that you address the larger issue, which is parking. We never discussed or even imagined companies coming in, buying 2 or 3 lots, combining lots to build projects. That was never envisioned by our subcommittee. We never really saw that happening. And then they decided to have to do that to meet the current parking demands. They have to build 3 floors of underground parking, which is happening now. In the future, I would hope we don't have all of our projects being 3 or 4 lot projects with underground parking. I would like to see us go back to some individual lot development. And to do that, we have to do something about the parking. So changing the interior heights does not fix the problem. And what it's going to do is just allow to continue what we already are getting now. So I would really suggest that you look at alternatives. And if you're going to do a vote, let's do a more comprehensive study and evaluate what the whole plan is instead of just taking one little piece at a time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Any additional public comments? All right, I'll go ahead and close the public comments and bring it back for discussion. Do we have any comments from council on this? Mr. Federico.
At face value, this seems quite simple. I think it allows for more flexibility. It doesn't say that the first floor height must be 14. It just says it no longer has to be 18 and just has to be a minimum of 14, and certainly could go to 18, I think, by right, because it would still be in the town center plan. But I've gotten a lot of input from certainly members of the city who put a lot of time and effort into the original town center plan, and there was a lot of thought behind why it was there. There's also a lot of concern, like Mr. Miller says, about addressing just other, I'll call them implementation issues in the town center plan. There's also been a lot of resident angst, I guess, about those 18-foot first floors, and I get there that nothing is complete yet, and so it's kind of hard to judge something until it's done. But there are a lot of people that say that that's not what they thought that they were going to be getting. So it's a challenging issue. I originally this seems quite simple. While it doesn't address all of the probably bigger implementation issues with the town center plan, Mr. Miller, the rest of Mr. Miller's point is that despite all the hard work that went into the town center plan, it probably was not perfect. We didn't envision things like how we were going to address the smaller lots and everything else. I'm really interested to hear what my colleagues up here say, because part of me says we should wait and readdress and see if there are other implementation plans. And part of me says, well, you know what, this one we can address at face value, and we could always address other ones later if they come up and people make us aware of them. So I'm very interested to hear what the rest of you have to say on it.
Thank you. Any other comments? Mr. Vixork.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, I think the reason what we're even talking about is because of the amendment to the town center plan. In order for any tweaks to be made in response to anything that we think maybe is not working in the town center plan, in order to effectuate it, we can't make that decision. We have to send it to an election. So that's what we're talking about here tonight, is if we are going to make a tweak, if we think it is something that we should do, to put it on the ballot to see if that change should be made. So one of the problems, I think the comments of our speaker are very well taken, in that all we're doing here is proposing one tweak to the current version of the town center plan. And in order to do that, putting it on the ballot, the next election we have coming up is the March primary in 2020. There's a cost to that. And it's going to cost us up to $85,000 to do that. And that's a problem. So should we send up one tweak for $85,000? And if we then discover later that we want to make another tweak to it, it's going to cost us another $85,000, another election. I believe that if we do, this is on a scheduled election, if we do a special election, it's going to cost a lot more than $85,000. So while I appreciate the fact that this has been brought forward and it's something that we're discussing, is it worth it to send up one minor tweak for $85,000? I don't think so. I think if we are going to do something, we need to identify more than just this one. I mean, are we really going to say this is it? Because I don't want to continually do this over and over and over again. So from my perspective, if we did vote for this tonight, it would be us saying, you know what? The town center plan is almost perfect. We need this one tweak. We're going to do it, and then we're good. I don't think that's going to be the case. So while, again, I think this is a good discussion, I don't think it's something that we should be doing here tonight. Now, I do have a question, I guess, that can be answered about the timing. I would prefer to continue this and continue the discussion if there are other things that should be added to this potential election for the people to decide. So I wouldn't advocate doing this tonight, but I don't know how much time we have. I believe we have at least another month or so. Can anyone answer that question?
If it were going to be continued and if the council were to ultimately desire to send something forward to the registrar of voters, ideally, it wouldn't be continued past the next meeting, but from a technical legal standpoint, I believe it could go out to the November 17th, if I'm remembering dates correct, 19th meeting.
Okay.
There's a lot of logistical issues that the city clerk's office, working with our office, will have to address. And so it's a burden on staff to go past the November 5th election bluntly, but if the council wants to go to the 19th, we'll make it happen.
Well, I certainly appreciate that, and I don't want to be a burden on staff.
There's just a lot of work, as the thing you have to recognize.
But this is of such significance that I think we should get it right. If we are going to send something up, even if that does mean more work, and I apologize to staff for that. But it is where we are. And I guess just to sum up, I'm not prepared to vote for this tonight as it is. And I think we do need more time, as the comments we've heard, to really look into, is this a good idea? Is this what we want to send forward and put on the ballot in March? So my suggestion would be, and I suppose I'll turn into a substitute motion, is that we simply continue this item to the next meeting to continue to discuss it. That's my motion.
Thank you. Mr. White has his light on. My mic is on, sorry. Mr. White has his light on, but I'm going to entertain a second for the substitute motion right now. And I'll go ahead and second it because I think that's a good discussion to have due to some input. I'm going to talk about it later. So, Mr. White, go ahead.
So I'm not in support of this motion as it's that we have here tonight. This item was, as you know, put on from the last meeting with the Chamber of Commerce asked us to consider this, supporting that. Basically, it was a relatively succinct request, and I'll read a part of it, right, which is, we strongly believe this would be good for business and is the best interest of the membership we represent. This flexibility would allow developers to reduce the height of ground floor retail in town, will allow for better architecture while also accommodating projects that are more in scale of our downtown environment, especially with respect to pedestrian-friendly human-scale ground floor. So my takeaway after we said that we would entertain was that we would get more detail. We have not done that, so I have to take their the rationale as what they've stated, which is basically that the ground floor, in their view, doesn't appear to be pedestrian friendly and human scale as they described it here. I'm sorry, I just lost the document on my keyboard here. So with that in mind, you know, I mean, the request in and of itself didn't necessarily seem like a bad request, but my question basically was, well, you know, this was a long project, worked with a number of people over a number of years to draft this plan. And the people saw fit to set the height at 18 feet for the first floor. And so I was curious about why that was. If we were going to change it, we should understand why it got set to that height to begin with. And I want to read what I thought was a very significant piece of information from an email received from one of our residents, Terry Walsh, we all got, who was on the committee. And they said that, you know, they hired an urban planning and design expert to advise them through the process, and were strongly urged to have an 18-foot first floor minimum, as it provides a higher quality look and feel for the buildings. And it says the 18-foot had nothing to do with big box stores, which we've heard come up often, and they were never mentioned. But it goes on to say that the actual height limit of the building was changed from 35 feet to 40 feet because of the 18 floor first floor. So if you know anything about height limits in our city, getting them to extend the height limit up is a big deal. And they decided in this case that having an 18-foot first floor was so important, they were willing to actually raise the building height to be able to accommodate it when they put in there. So this wasn't a sort of, you know, pick some number out of the air and put it on there. This was a long discussion that involved a lot of angst for them to decide to do it. So changing it without going back and understanding all of the rest of the implications of that and working through what else would change with it and what it would, what it would do and allow, I think is needs consideration. And I'll get back to some of the other concerns I have for it in a bit, but I think that's in and of itself. So I went to decided, since I really didn't have a good understanding beyond that, I did seek out a couple of different architects to tell me why that might have been at that height and what the implications of it were from their perspective. And it actually wasn't terribly hard to get some really solid input on this. So the 18-foot high ground floor was important because it is the minimum height that would allow you to put a mezzanine level in. And the mezzanine level, when you're using that space for certain types of retail uses, or in fact back office and storage, where you may have behind the store portions office space and or warehouse space, if you go below 18, you can actually fit a mezzanine in. So you have that. And so you either have to be 18 or higher to put that in. So that provided a real benefit to the space besides the look. They also said essentially that it is the most flexible space in terms of use. So their view is that these retail spaces will get repurposed a number of times over the life of the building. And every time you repurpose them, you need to know the flexibility of what I can fit into this space. And an 18-foot height gives the most flexibility for repurposing space. You have a lot of options in doing it. You can, put things that need the height in there. You can put mezzanines and other levels in. Anyway, the overall view was it's the perfect height to have great flexibility, and that's why it's such a common height and supported so broadly. So I thought that was a significant piece of information. So then my question really came back to then looking to decide how do we address the concern about sort of this street level usability part where it feels so tall. And again, the architectural answer was, well, that has nothing to do with the height of the first floor. The height of the first floor on the interior and the way the height of it looks from the exterior are almost totally unrelated. So I took some education on that to try to understand how that worked. But basically, their answer again was, well, if you use various ways to separate horizontally the first floor depending on the look you're after. So if you're looking for high arch windows because that's your architectural style of the retailer who's going in there or somebody, you have the right to do that. If you're looking for awnings and sort of low, more pedestrian where it feels more small townish, then you put horizontal dividers in that space and you do it and you break the facade up in so that the space above an awning or a thing looks different than the space below, and therefore when you're walking at it, there's no external evidence about that indicates what the height of the first floor is. The height of the street view is based on the facade, not on the interior. And in fact, I asked last week, I showed a picture of a building that was in the town center plan that had this, but I asked Rachel if she could queue up a picture of a building that has the dimensions that has one example of the facade, I think was. So this building has an 18-foot height, and you can see that there's a horizontal divider between the stilts, essentially. The window space above it is different than below it, and then the awning breaks that up. So when you're at a pedestrian level, that height of that is down to where a normal door height is. It doesn't look like an 18-foot space. And so sort of the architectural input I got was that this is a relatively typical way you break it up when that's the look you want, but you have the option of doing taller windows if you decide to showcase your fermentation tanks for your microbrewery in the window. Then you can go up to 18 feet and do some interesting things, or that would be one of my favorites, but that's a different discussion. And doing things like that. Also, Rachel, do you have the rain tree site up where we could pull up some of the exterior looks at their building on it? So on the exterior 360 view of this, you can see what the various external architectures that they are proposing on some of the buildings are. So these break up in all sorts of ways. So if you look at the one on the very right, where you can see the black awning coming out to break up the space, and there's another couple where there's again, it looks almost identical. So as they've looked at how to break these up, we're looking at them sitting on the stilts, right? And so you're looking at an 18-foot gap standing from the sidewalk. There was a suggestion that, construction-wise, they could have split that space with a horizontal between the two stilts to make it easier to do this, but it takes away flexibility. So as you want to tear off the facade and decide that it's no longer a retail store, it's a restaurant, and you want to do alcoves and setbacks in it and stuff, you take that away if you do it. So the most flexible facade support is to leave the stilts in and then change the the facade to either look like it's your flagship store on Fifth Avenue in New York, or change it to look like it's the local bakery that run by local, and it changed that look out. So I think that it was well thought out. That doesn't mean it could never ever be changed. I think that if the change is what was represented by our chamber, which is basically it feels unfriendly when you're standing next to the stilts under construction, that we should delay a bit before we make any rash changes to this plan and rush it on to a March ballot. I think that would be unless there's some other reason for it which hasn't been disclosed, I think that would be a mistake to do that. So that was sort of architecturally wise. We've already brought up one of the other concerns, which is it's a $85,000 price tag to the city to support this, and if there were to be a group changing, I think we need to go back. As I said, as Mr. Walsh's letter said, they held 36 meetings over a number of years to create this plan. We need to go back and go through it as methodically as they did and update it correctly. So I think that while I appreciate their concern about the look while it's under construction, rushing into a change to just make it because we think it's going to look too pedestrian unfriendly is a mistake on our part, and a relatively expensive one, and too early to make that. So I for these reasons, don't support the recommended action.
Ms. Lewis.
Thank you. Well, I guess I'm just gonna echo where everybody else is here. I also do not support this. I don't even support bringing this back in March. I think that's way too fast. I will note that we got, I guess, half a dozen letters on this, all of them opposed to a change. So let me just talk about some of them. Let's see. So several of the letters were from people who had served on the subcommittee, saying that they had served on the subcommittee, they took a lot of time, they brought an architect in, and that at the end, the subcommittee voted unanimously to include this height, being the 18 feet, in the final plan that was ultimately adopted by the city council. Another one said, please take the time to study this item with the original writers of the 2008 Town Center Plan and members of the public to fully vet the potential ramifications, which I completely agree with. I mean, it sounds easy on its face, but nothing is easy. It all has consequences and unintended consequences. And heaven knows I'm not an architect or an expert in this, so I would like to know what all of the ramifications would be to making this change or any other changes. Another speaker or another writer points out this item can go on the November ballot if it is decided that it is appropriate and honestly crafted, and that the November ballot will be a better gauge of voter sentiment because, of course, March versus November. November is going to bring out a lot more voters than March. And then there were just a couple others. Mr. Walsh's letter was stated. I would be remiss if I didn't point out the irony, though, in the chamber coming forth and telling us now that they need height variances, not higher, but lower, being that height was one of the huge reasons for Measure H in the first place. And in fact, those people who were proponents of the original Majestic wanted variance for it to be even higher. I have a question as to the $85,000 that we've been talking about. This is something that's being requested by the businesses, not by the city. Is the city required to pay this, or can we pass this cost on to the people who have requested these changes?
If the city can get agreement with someone else to pay for it, then absolutely, they could reimburse the city for it.
Okay, so one of the things I would explore is, why are the taxpayers paying $85,000 to subsidize builders who are making a profit off this and who have decided, you know, we built it, we pushed this thing through, we said there wasn't going to be any building if Measure H passed, we were going to have a bunch of empty lots. Now people are going, oh my gosh, we've got a lot of building going on, maybe, whoa, let's slow it down and let's take the height down. So, you know, I feel like the city should not be picking up the tab for that ballot measure. I would be a proponent of studying this at length, having a workshop, public workshops, or more than one workshop, bringing together all the original people of the subcommittee who are interested in coming in, talking, giving feedback, bringing in the public, and then some experts who can tell us what this change means, in not just in terms of height, but what else does it do, if anything? What are the upsides? What are the downsides? And we still haven't heard from the chamber as to, you know, nobody's here telling us who wants this, why do they want this, and what are the benefits to the city to make these changes. I understand the benefits to the business, but we're in the business of saying, what are the benefits to the city and the city residents? Well, I haven't heard that yet. So I would like to hear that. And that would all be part of the studying of, why are we doing this? And is it beneficial? And if it's beneficial, then, you know, we should come to some consensus that there is a benefit to the city and to the residents. After all, our vision statement was that our vision or our mission to make this the livable, what was it?
Set the standard for an exceptionally livable city.
Exceptionally livable city. So I would want to hear, hey, how does changing this now from the 18 feet, which we were told was going to make this a really nice look, and I think it still could be. We have to wait and see what it's going to look like once you put all the, you know, lipstick and stuff on it. What makes this an exceptional, what makes this make our city more exceptionally livable by making this change? Because I think it has the potential to look nice. And Kelly, could you put that first picture back up, please, that Paul brought in? Yeah, thank you. So I noticed that it has a flat roof and it seems very attractive, and the way they've broken it up, it doesn't look like, you know, big 18-foot stilts. So I think, you know, by the time it gets done, and believe me, I look at this thing every day from my house and I look at it and go, geez, that's big. But, you know, waiting for it to be finished and see what it looks like and get planted and get people walking around. But I think this looks very attractive, and it has flat roofs, and I wouldn't be rushing to change this just because somebody wants to make the roof more of a pie shape than a flat. So long and short, I'm not for this change right now. I'm not for doing it in March. And if we're going to make any change, it would be for me after doing studying and public outreach with the committee and the public and the chamber and hearing their rationale and then talking about who's going to pay for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we got some good discussion out of this tonight. You know, some points are being made about the original town center plan. Mr. Miller was here. He spoke tonight. He was there. He also agreed that he wouldn't be in favor of this unless it was more encompassing. And he also spoke about how the unintended consequences of what we're dealing with right now is that we are getting all of these large developments. Measure H was spawned out of the Majestic project, and it was specifically about how big it was, and we've got that. We have another one very similar to it, the Union Bank building. We have another one, the ACE building, and I saw one on the development update tonight that it's been submitted. It hasn't been approved, but everything we're looking at are these large developments. And I don't believe that that was the vision of the city. We have small lots out there that are going to remain undeveloped. And I think what I'm hearing from residents, and I spoke with Mr. Walsh today, because it shocked me about his letter, because he and I had spoken about this before, that we did need to do something down there to address these smaller lots and see if there's something we could do to get them developed. Get us another craft house or a coastal kitchen, something like that. That was the vision of what the city was going to be like from his perspective. And that's not what we're getting right now. And so, you know, he and I spoke. I've spoken to other residents that believe we do have other issues. I mean, this is just a building issue. We have other zoning issues about uses down there, electronic EV charging stations. We would have to put that on a ballot. There are a lot of things like that that are coming up because communities change after 16 years when this started. The requirements of the city are going to be different. I mean, we have and this, you know, that this was a builders driven, you know, request. This is from our Chamber of Commerce. These are not developers. I guess some of them may be, but most of them are residents. They live here and they work here and they see what's happening with these large developments, and they're not against them, but they would like to see some other things as well. I mean, this picture that we have up on the screen right now, that's big box retail. That's Sur La Table. That is not a small neighborhood store. And you have a flat roof next to a slanted roof. So it gave them the option to make changes, that it's not all going to be flat roofs. That's what we're getting right now. Everything that's been presented has got a flat roof on the top of it. And so that was the issue when I was speaking with the chamber, is they want to see some character. They don't just want to see flat roofs everywhere. And I said, well, and I was there with Mr. Federico. When I looked at it, I said, well, 18 to 14 is not really a big deal. I don't think it's kind of innocuous in my opinion. But again, I don't know. I mean, that would, to me, made sense. They can do something a little bit different at the roof line, make it look interesting. And that's where I was like, so I was willing to bring this forward and have a discussion about it. This is all about, you know, another unintended consequences we're dealing with in the city is the change that was made to the town center plan a couple of years ago requires this discussion. We have to put these things out for a vote. And so, you know, those are all things we have to think about. And I think that's why it's here today. I don't think it's a bad idea to continue this. I mean, if we continue to November, we have another discussion. It gives people a chance to come forward and say, okay, what are the other things we would like to see addressed on this? We don't have that right now, but doesn't mean they shouldn't have a chance to come back and give us an opportunity to listen to them, discuss them, see if we want to move forward. No harm, no foul if we say no. If we decide, hey, that is something that could be beneficial to our community, we can have that discussion then. Then we can go ahead and make a decision, should we put it on the March primary or not? You know, one of the things everybody remembers what happened 2 years ago, all of this was very politicized. Primaries are a good place to put this because this shouldn't be politicized any longer. This is a vote of the people. Put it out there, let them decide. If they say yes, it's great. If they say no, it's no. And we shouldn't be up here trying to decide who should and shouldn't take that away from them. You know, the last ballot measure we put on was paid for by the city. And so, you know, to say when we have residents come to us and say, we want this, I mean, this is something that we are required to vote on now. Should we be looking at making them come up with the money to pay for it when the last ballot measure, the people who ran that were not required to pay for it? So, you know, again, if they're willing to, and that's one of the conditions they'd like to push forward, we can definitely speak with them about that, but I wouldn't really anticipate that happening. You know, this whole thing started in 2003. The original recommendation was 65 feet on these buildings because they deemed that was not going to impact views. That was not acceptable to this community, and they moved it down. To say they went up to 40, they were much higher than that. They actually went from 65 feet to 40 feet because they knew they had an issue. They needed to raise the heights. And I believe the bridge down at the entrance to Dana Point down by Denny's, how high is that building? How high is that bridge? 50 feet? See there? Where are you?
It's 45.
45 feet. So it's actually higher than the buildings we have now. And nobody's complaining about the height of that building. This is not about reducing heights. This is about getting the architects some architectural leeway to make these things more interesting. So I would absolutely support moving this forward to November, having a little bit a longer discussion about it. Let the community come out and say what they want to see and what they would like us to discuss. If we get there, we get there. If we don't, we don't. But it's interesting that, well, it's not interesting. It's just, it's something we have to do and make a decision if we're going to move forward or not. So those are my comments. Ms. Lewis.
Thank you. I just want to address the Measure H thing. Majestic had bought and consolidated the lots long before Measure H came. So I don't want anybody with the impression that Measure H caused this consolidation. The consolidation was there before. And in fact, Majestic wanted to go up 60 feet with their elevator towers. So that was really part of the impetus of that. And in terms of that picture, the flat roof, I think next to it is another flat roof. It's just that there's different heights. It's not, 40 feet for the whole block, which makes that attractive. So again, I would like to say that if we're going to do this, I would like us to take time, go to November. If what we're worried about is getting a vote of the people, we're going to get a lot more of our residents out in November and voting than we are in March. So if we really want to get a census of the people and their opinion, I say we don't put it on the ballot until November, if we put it on the ballot at all. Thank you.
Mr. White. Excuse me, Mr. White.
Yes, just a couple of comments, and I share the concern about small lot building. I've talked to the chamber about that in the past, and and what it would take. I think the issue that we're going to face there is on small lots. Putting all the parking underground is not really practical for that, and if you take away the footprint of the small lot by putting, surface level parking on it, then, the lots become unusable. That part of the plan didn't go awry because of all of this. The very first part of the infrastructure to be built per the town center plan were the parking garages that then could be shared for all of these small businesses to park. If we, and I've had several suggestions that I brought up in the past about how we can overcome the fact that we didn't do that, and therefore these smaller properties will not be able to park themselves. They will have to have shared public parking somewhere. So we're going to have to work through that, and that means the town center plan needs some rework in order to find a way to allow that to happen. Otherwise, it does become a very difficult challenge to get over the top of. I will address the roof line briefly, although it's, we're getting into the weeds in some of that. The the building height limits then allows 42-foot screening around for all of the roof equipment to hide it, or 42-inch screening around it to allow the equipment to be hidden. And those, and as they look at how to change the roof lines, that space plus down to cover the top floor, drop down over the windows, gives them a fair amount of drop space to put a sloped roof facade on those buildings to change the look and style of them as they set back. So again, I got several suggestions architecturally on how you would change the look of the roof line. They don't all have to appear to be flat roof just because the height limit. So I think all of these things are, can be thought through, and we can get people who actually do this for a living in to show us the alternatives that we have with what we had and what would happen if we change them. So again, I think this is we are not the experts up here on all the details of what could be done within the rules that we have, and so changing the rules without understanding what that means, without getting expert input, is a little bit of a mistake. So I think I hope anyway we're all agreeing that we need to do our homework before we make changes like this to the town center plan, and likely. I don't know if we could get it done by November anyway, but that would be certainly a reasonable target if we decide that we want to do something. But we should start to address, the small lot impact. We should look at repurposed parking. And one of the concerns that we always have on parking is if the demand for parking does, if the buildings are going to last for 40 or 50 years, and the demand for parking dramatically reduces during that time, which is certainly not out of the question. In fact, hopeful that it does. Then you need to be able to repurpose those parking structures to make a different use of them if possible. And so architecturally, we should look at what we do to make sure that that's possible, that and underground parking is not ideal for that. Underground parking, repurposing underground parking to make better use out of it is difficult at best. So I don't think we want to push necessarily that all the parking goes underground. That has limitations on what we do, and we want to keep that in mind.
Mr. Federico.
Thank you. I do appreciate everyone's comments, and I think I'm going to be in favor of continuing this so we can get some better ideas of kind of what we're trying to achieve if this goes forward, and why we would do it, and what the best and unintended, the best outcomes and unintended outcomes could be if the voters change this. And what I really want to say is, regardless what happens here, I'm very clear, we are not doing anything other than maybe voting to Ms. Lewis, send this to the voters to let them decide. We are not deciding anything other than that. So just to be very clear to everybody, when we do, if this does come back, when we do, I just would like to say to the council, I think we need to be careful not to put our personal taste in this too much. For what it's worth, the picture behind me, I can't stand that. It looks like an outlet mall to me, and I think that probably wasn't the vision. Maybe it was, I don't know, but we'll be true to the town center plan when it was, for all the hard work that went into getting it done back in 2008 and all the years before that went into getting it done. And make sure that if something goes to the voters, that it's a good idea, that it needs to go. And anyway, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a motion on the table, and we'll go ahead and the motion is to continue this until the November meeting. So we'll go ahead and take the vote.
I have a question about that. I don't understand what that motion is.
Okay, hold on. Go ahead, stop it. I can do that. So the motion is to continue this item until the first meeting in November to allow for more discussion about this and allow more input on whether we should do this or not.
The next council.
The next council meeting is what, November 4th? 5th, November 5th. So it'll be back on the agenda for November 5th. Okay, go ahead. Call the vote. All right, that vote passes 3-2. Can you see who? Mr. Munoz, I believe that we're supposed to show this. Okay, there it is. Okay, all right. Yeah, I couldn't see it. So we have Ms. Lewis and Mr. White in opposition. Thank you. All right, that brings us on to our next item, which is item 11. Bring that up. This is the OC Harbor Commercial Core Revitalization and Public Workshop and Open House Feedback. Mr. Denny, do we have a staff report on this? Are you? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, as you know, the county took about a 20-year process to plan the revitalization of Dana Point Harbor. One of the hallmarks of that process was an extensive public input process. In 2018, the county pivoted from a county initiated and built project, and they entered into a 66-year lease with the Dana Point Harbor Partners to implement the vision of the revitalization. Since that time, in October of 2018, Brian Ward and his team from the Harbor Partners have been seeking public input on the implementation for the commercial core, and they've recently submitted their initial set of plans for the hotel, and we'll get started on the public input process for the hotel. But tonight, Brian's here to share with the council, as he did with the Planning Commission just a couple weeks ago, the input received through that public process as we get to the finish line of getting ready to submit for building plans and actual construction to start next year. So I'd like to introduce Brian Ward to make a presentation to the council.
Okay, hold on. We're going to take public comment first, then we'll bring Mr. Ward up. Great. Do you have any public comment on this? Thank you. We have 3 speakers tonight. The first will be Don Hanson, followed by Jim Miller and Keegan Hicks.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. My name is Don Hanson. I'm a 80-year resident of this area. And as you possibly already know, I'm in the first business in the harbor in Dana Point. 49 years ago in Colorado, Santa Ana, I signed the lease. Ken Sampson, who was running the thing at the time, told me, we have one problem in the harbor, Mr. Hanson, there's not enough parking. It's taken 49 years to get to that point now. Thank God it's there, I think. Ms. Lewis was with us when we passed this thing to move on. So these people behind me have got the right idea. I probably have gone to 100 meetings on parking alone in the harbor. So now I support what they're trying to do, get this done. And thank you, and I can go home and go to bed.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Jim Miller.
All right, good evening again. So as you know, the merchants have been waiting for almost 20 years for this to happen. And tonight, I'm here tonight to let you know the Dana Point Harbor Partners are here and ready to make the 20-year vision become a reality. The open house was very well attended. It showed our community was vested in the project and the future of the great harbor. The feedback was positive, and then they do care what the public thinks and will give us the best development for the harbor. The Dana Point Harbor Partners took control almost a year ago, and just come down and see what they've already done just in a short time. And I know they're going to bring a revitalized harbor that will maintain the small harbor character that everyone has asked for. Not only have they been reaching out to the community, but they've also engaged in the merchants in new marketing programs, new events, and creating an improved retail experience such as painting the buildings, new lights in the parking lot and around the corridors, daily maintenance, and they gave us more parking already just in this past year. They've only been here a year. I can't wait to see what they're going to do in the years to come. So from the merchants' perspective, we support Dana Point Harbor Partners, Brian Ward, and what they're doing, and we can't wait to get started. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Keegan Hicks, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. My name is Keegan Hicks. I live in Laguna Niguel. I've been the operating partner of the Harbor Grill for the last 17 years and a vocal supporter of the harbor revitalization. And I'm here tonight to continue that support. Over the history of evolution, humans have had three basic choices: adapt, migrate, or die. The point is that change is necessary for survival. It's important for the Dana Point leadership and community to continue to support and adapt to the change that is coming. I'm confident that the Dana Point Harbor Partners will get the job done right with the overall best interest of all of the Dana Point community in mind. Please continue to move the project forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, Mr. Ward. I did that intentionally because I want to make your job easier, so they kind of give your update for you, but this is great.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'm going to go quick because I know Don wants to go home and go to bed.
That was the other issue. I thought he might
I'm
run
going to
out
keep
here.
this moving. It's a genuine pleasure to be here before you. As was mentioned by Mr. Denny, my design team actually had the opportunity to present our most recent effort with the community to the Planning Commission, and I wanted to come before you personally tonight to give you the same update and to assure you that we're doing everything we can to move this project along. In keeping with the traditions of seeking public input for this project, we engaged in a public workshop process. As many of you know, we've accomplished working very hard with staff these past number of months. We've accomplished a certificate of compliance that really paves the way for us to move forward on the commercial core part of the project. But before doing that, although our certificate of compliance does pin down a lot of primary design elements, we do have some flexibilities on some discretionary design features with a project, and that is what we wanted to invite the community in on. So we held 3 community workshops, and in fact, we had an amazing attendance. We actually had over 1,000 respondents to our inquiries about things that the public wanted to see integrated into our design features for the commercial core. We held 3 events. So for people that couldn't attend the first, they had 2 other opportunities to attend, and all 3 events were really well attended. So we couldn't have been more happier with the responses. I just wanted to outline some of the categories that we asked people's input on. In terms of some of those discretionary level things that we still have the opportunity to infuse some of the public's desires into the overall design. Things like colors and materials. Things like patios and trellis, landscaping and design materials, events and programmable areas, and tenants and new uses that we would be looking for to bring to the harbor. So these are all incredibly important things for the local community, and we've got, in a lot of cases, our suspicions were confirmed, and we got a lot of really new ideas. So we have, since accomplishing these workshops, we've been working very, very hard with our design team to integrate a lot of these comments into the new design of the project. In addition to, a lot of the specific areas that we received input on, we also got input on other areas of the harbor. And there obviously were some concerned residents about some of the things that
were preserved in the old approvals and carried over into our approvals that they wanted to see changed. And while some of these things are difficult to change because they represent some fundamental features in the plan, we do feel like we could entertain some of the design changes that the public asked for. And I'd like to outline a few of those things for you, but before doing that, I wanted to just kind of briefly hit on some of the things that were actually conclusions in some of our workshops, things with design materials and colors. The community really liked the idea of natural weathered woods that patina over time, and a real coastally authentic environment that wasn't Newport Beach or Huntington Beach, but distinctively Dana Point. And so we had some really great input based upon some renderings and some photographs that really kind of pinned that down for us. In patios and trellis, we really got the feeling from the community that they love their outdoor spaces. And so we're really enhancing what we had already sort of anticipated in terms of exterior design for a lot of these outdoor spaces. Fire pits, soft seating areas, things like that will all be very, very well represented in the new plan. Landscaping design and materials. Obviously, the public was very keyed in on making sure that we're green, okay, in terms of utilizing drought-tolerant plant material. And we're very committed to doing that in the project. Lots of natural grasses, again, eco-friendly, drought-tolerant, again, but with a very coastal vibe. Events and programmable areas. This was a great topic for the community. People want live music in the harbor, and they want events, and the merchants want the events, because what we're really trying to do is create a very activated event schedule for Dana Point Harbor. So it's not just about a couple events a year. It's really about filling a calendar all year long. So we got some incredible feedback on those. And new uses. People want more upscale and culinary focused dining opportunities. They want a bakery. They want craft beer and wine. They want more farm to table options. Anyway, there's some great input on the types of uses, more marine focused retailing and things like that. So again, all of these things, I assure you, are going to work their way into our final design elements. On some of the public comment, I did want to say that, and I think that our design brought this up at the Planning Commission meeting, that we did get a lot of public comment on the tower element in our project that is sort of a central piece of the main public gathering area at the entrance to the project. A lot of residents, particularly those that live up on the bluff above, Golden Lantern, really wanted to see if we could pick that tower up and move it. So we open up a greater view corridor down through the center of the project. And
excuse me, Mr. Work, are you able to do that?
We are.
Are you committing to doing that?
Well, yes. The tower element works as vertical transportation and ADA accessibility, and there's some other important features. As long as we can keep it in the central area, but move it to the side, I think there's a way for us to reduce the massing of the tower element and move it to the side and open up the view court and still maintain some of those other features. It is viewed as a public accessibility and a public benefit improvement. So I think that we could work with staff on ways to maintain the integrity of the design, of the intent, but open up that view corridor for the residents up the hill. And to answer your question, Mr. Mayor, I'm committing to working with our design team to try to make that happen.
Thank you.
Sure. Unless there's any other questions, that's really all I have to say. It's been a pleasure. Staff has been incredible to work with. I've had an opportunity to work extensively with the merchants. Everybody's excited about the project. We've made some minor moves just to kind of keep things going and keep everybody happy, but we're anxious to get started on the new construction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ward, very much. that is great news that you're taking all that public input into consideration and be able to address some of those needs. I wouldn't go away just yet. I think there's going to be some questions for you.
Sure.
And let's see here. I got Miss Lewis is up.
Hi, thank you. Welcome. We appreciate you working with us.
Absolutely.
I just have a question now about the tower, right? Because it's a change. So I just want to know if it moves to the side to get it out of the view corridor for the people up there. Does it move it into anybody else's view corridor, or how does that impact other residents?
It really, the idea would be to make it more integral to the building design. It would slightly change the adjacent building's massing slightly because it has to be integrated. In other words, the element can't go away completely, but it could be integrated. So I think it really is a function of creating a stronger view corridor down the middle of the project in favor of trying to replace some of the things that the tower did in its new location.
Yeah, no, I got that it'll open up the middle. My
Yeah.
question is, what are the consequences of moving it wherever you're moving it? Does it impact other people now, not the people who are sighting down the center?
You know, most of the comment that we received was really sighting down the center. And, you know, again, I think that from a view perspective, it's just sort of a shift. It seems like most of the comment was the view kind of looking down Golden Lantern in through the entrance throat of the project. And I think that was what most people were after, is trying to keep that view corridor open as much as possible.
Okay, and where would it move? Which
It
side?
would shift to the right, potentially right or left, but we believe that it makes a lot more sense to shift it to the right
Right, as you're looking at it from
as you're
Golden,
looking at
or
it from
Golden?
Dana Point Harbor Drive.
Okay.
Yeah.
so- all
And
right.
again, we're still studying this.
Uh-huh.
And, you know, we would have to sit down with staff and make sure whatever move that we're making maintains the integrity of the original intent. But again, I think that my feeling is that it will probably, and if we were to be able to make this change, it would satisfy a lot of people's concerns.
Okay, and how tall is that?
Our tower is, again, it's consistent with the original CDP in terms of the building heights.
Mhm.
And I believe it's just under 60 feet. Again, which is consistent with the original approvals that we inherited.
Okay,
So, but I think our intent would be to try to actually take it down a little bit. One of the things that we have an opportunity to do is the tower element obviously was a public amenity as well, because it gives people an opportunity to go up and view the greater harbor.
Mhm.
And that is, the Coastal Commission's eyes is again, a public accessibility and public amenity. We have an opportunity, if we integrate it to the side, to potentially open up kind of a rooftop garden, if you will, that wouldn't be visible from the bluff top, but it would sort of act as a public amenity to replace some of the benefits that the tower offered where its current location is. So we have a couple things that we can consider, again, to maintain the integrity of and the intent behind what it was designed to do.
okay,
And we would look forward to working with staff on that.
okay, thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Federico.
Mr. Ward, I just want to say thank you on behalf of our residents for going above and beyond to take their input and trying to integrate as much of it as you can. So
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We're very excited for this project. As you heard, 1,000 people responded to this. I mean, I wish we could get that kind of response when the council tries to do something. So anyway, thank you so much. And we're really looking forward to working with you in the future.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Okay. This is a receive and file. So we're going to go ahead and receive and file this item. The next item on deck is the Dana Point Trolley update. Mr. Denny, do we have a report?
Yes, sir. Matt Sanacory has your trolley update for 2019.
Good evening again, council. There is a pretty detailed staff report that I provided you tonight. I would also encourage the community to check out that staff report, but just so you know what the plan is for tonight is to receive and file the ridership results from this past 2019 trolley season, which just ended at the end of September. Also to approve in concept applying for additional grant funds to OCTA for an upcoming call for projects, which is coming out any day now. And to also receive and file.
It actually came out yesterday.
There you go. So we'll be working on that. And then also receive and file draft proposed route changes for the 2020 season and forward. So I'm going to walk you through a quick PowerPoint presentation just to highlight some of the items in the staff report. First up, just a reminder that we're obligated by our grants to maintain a 15-minute headway between trolleys and consistently provide at least 10 boardings per vehicle per hour, which is a substantial number.
Okay, thank you. I was just going to say this. Could you bring that up on our screens? All right, thank you.
I think all of you rode the trolley this past season, so I won't bore you with the route because you all were on it. The ridership results for 2019, that's broken up into 3 categories. Summer 2019, which basically went Memorial Day to Labor Day. We had 78,701 trips on that trolley. We broke September weekend separately. That was about 4,036. You see a little dip in ridership in September. Much of that has to do with some of the tourists going away, as well as the kids being back in school. I don't think we realize how many kids actually use that service in the summer. Also, the harbor shuttle, you can see it struggled again this year down in the harbor, and we'll talk about that in a second. These are going to be a little hard to read, so I encourage you to look at your staff report. We actually broke up all the ridership for the summer trolley season, Memorial Day to Labor Day, by high-use stops to low-use stops. You can check that out. Obviously, the Ritz-Carlton stop at the connection with Laguna Beach is your #1 stop. There's a couple that'll surprise you on this list. Particularly when you look at the high school stop, that's number 6 or 7 on your list up here by the City Hall. The next slide will capture September weekend service again. Refer to your staff report for that. And then this one actually combines all of the Dana Point trolley results by stop. And this is again just the Dana Point trolley route, not the harbor shuttle. All right, so I'm going to bump off this PowerPoint into this map page on Adobe just in case the council has specific questions. I know this is hard to see. We have advertised these proposed routes on our website in the Dana Point Times, and we can assure you we're already getting input from the community. Ms. Renders has also assisted us with Ms. Johnson on getting social media out on this, so we are getting a lot of input at this time. So the proposed routes, I could walk you through these north routes and south routes, but the intention of the change is to respond to not only touching more portions of the city. I think the city council remembers one of the biggest requests that we've gotten in recent time is to get up to Ocean Ranch, the top of Golden Lantern. These proposed routes do that. Also to eliminate wait times and the amount of time someone has to go around the city when they really want to go from point A to point B. We feel there's some transfers that could be made that really will accelerate the community's ability to get around. That's the primary reason for the changes that you see. As the mayor mentioned, there is a call for projects out. Our intention right now is that with the harbor shuttle struggling, that we would be using that bus that is down in the harbor or has been down in the harbor for the last few years to give us a 6th vehicle that we need to run these 2 routes and then service the harbor in a slightly different way. That would be to do a north route and a south route. We find that would be a better use of those 6 buses for the community. Lastly, we will be back in front of you in December, maybe January, to request a resolution authorizing us to apply for grant funds. I think I covered the high-level points. Obviously, myself and the city manager are here for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sinacori. Madam Clerk, do we have public comment on this?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, I'll bring it back to council for a motion. Mr. Federico.
Move the 3 items for recommended action in the agenda.
Mr. Exor.
Second.
All right, we got a motion and a second. I'll bring it back to council for discussion. Mr. Exor. Okay, you took it off. Okay, there you go. Well, you hit the button, so you're up.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, thank you also, Mr. Sinacori, for your work on this. Thank you for putting in a route going up to Ocean Ranch. Couple of questions now that we have two proposed routes. How many trolleys do we have?
We have 5 open air trolleys and 1 shuttle that is available to us. And of course, additional shuttles if we need them for events or other things.
And so prior to, we had 1 route before this, correct? And they had to run in 15-minute intervals, or can you explain how many we had on the road at any one time?
So we ran 5 on the Dana Point trolley, and due to the length, it was about an hour and 10-minute round trip. If you really rode that all the way around, we needed the 5 vehicles to make that headway, particularly with the varying stop times for the drivers when they get heavy use at a stop or whatever that may be. We've looked at these routes and believe that we can cover the 15-minute headway with 3 buses on each route and still make it work.
You answered my question. Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you for this. Could you bring up the ridership numbers? And you just do the first slide that you brought up of the ridership.
Yikes.
See, I'm not the only one that struggles with new technology.
Clicked on the PowerPoint. Roberts reported that I broke it. I apologize.
Well, I can make my comments without it because I know what those numbers are. But as most of you know, that I sit on the OCTA board, and that graph that you brought up is incredibly important to OCTA. That type of data is used when other cities come in and they propose routes at certain times in certain areas of their city. And because there are ridership number requirements to maintain your grant, this one right here, these numbers are incredibly valuable to us. So when we take a look at, we think the September weekend trolley program, pilot program is a good idea. Well, these numbers make it look like maybe it wasn't. And the harbor shuttle, absolutely. You take a look at it, you're trying to meet every need for everyone. And instead of, investing the funds into new trolleys and new routes that we know, quite frankly, just aren't going to be successful, we can work with those different cities to help them find routes that will be successful. So I want to thank you for that. I mean, keeping this kind of data, especially for Dana Point, because we are the largest recipient of Project V funds. And hopefully we're going to get another trolley. I mean, I saw the letter that we submitted, and hopefully we're going to get that. I may be a little bit premature. We voted to release the call for projects yesterday. So the board voted to do that. So I don't know if you've actually received it yet. But thank you for that. And, the Ocean Ranch loop was incredibly important to me. I know I've been bugging staff about that for a few years. And the reason being is that's the Ralph's I shop at. And we have a lot of the employees there live down in Lantern Village, and they want the trolley to take them up to work. And I said, well, we have issues around that. I said, now, quite frankly, it only goes in one direction. I'm not sure you want to ride it for an hour and 10 minutes to get home. So that's going to be a huge help to the community. I want to thank you for all your hard work on this, staff. I mean, this has been an incredibly valuable program, not just for Dana Point, but for OCTA. The Project V trolleys replaced bus routes that were canceled. We had a lot of our large buses running around cities that were just running around empty. And this helps us utilize those dollars more efficiently. So thank you. I'm very excited about this. We have a motion and a second. I'll go ahead and take the vote on this. Rachel? Okay, that passes 5-0. Thank you so much. Thanks for all the hard work. That brings us to item 13. Amendment of Dana Point Municipal Code Section 12.08.098, vehicle citations authorized to allow for the issuance of parking citations by a non-peace officer. Mr. Denny, do we have a staff report? Got it.
Yes, Mr. Sinacori has the staff report for you as well.
Mr. Denny's enjoying me talking so much this evening, for sure. Good evening again.
You should break that on my agenda and I'll send it to him.
This item's pretty straightforward. We're asking for a code amendment to allow other folks besides peace officers to be allowed to write parking citations. This aligns with other code sections, but what we'd be looking at is city manager delegated staff or contract employees if possible. The code amendment's attached as action document A, and we are available for questions.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Do we have any public comment? Okay, I'll go ahead and close that. Do I have a motion on this item? Mr. White?
Yes, I move the item as written.
Okay, and I'll go ahead and second it. You gotta be quicker, Ms. Lewis. So, okay, so yeah, there's a delay in the screens, I guess. All right, I'll bring it back for comments from the staff or from the council. Any comments on this? Ms. Lewis?
Yes, thank you. I just want to say thank you to the city and Mr. Denny. This is a really great thing, and I think it's going to help the residents, and it is a cost saving, and it'll free up our deputies to do things that we really want them to do. So thank you guys very much.
Any other comments? No, we'll go ahead and take the vote. That passes 5-0. Congratulations. Thank you. And for our deputies that are out here and our chief, go do some other stuff. Stop writing parking tickets. All right. Thank you. So that brings us to item 14. Councilmember Lewis, Orange County Housing Finance Trust. Mr. Day, I guess we're going to have Ms. Lewis present this one. Go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, so I just wanted to bring this back because we joined the Orange County Housing Trust almost 6 months ago. And at the time, it was brand new and there were a lot of things that were not decided, like how much it would cost, the bylaw, there were some things on bylaws that had to be done. The organization really hadn't been finalized yet. But there was a provision in there that said the county was going to pay the cost the first year. And so we wouldn't have to pay that. But there was a 6-month notice period to get out of it. So if we want to get out of it after the end of the first year without having paid anything, this is the time we need to talk about it and discuss it. And if we want to stay in, that's fine too. But I just had calendared 6 months, and so here we are.
Okay. Do we have any public comment? All right. What is this? This is a receive and file? Are we to request any action on this? Oh, let me turn that on for you.
Well, I put it down as a vote to stay in or leave, because if we're going to leave, we need to give the 6-month notice. So that's why it's here now.
Okay, well, I need a motion then on, I guess the motion's to stay or go.
Yeah, okay, motion to stay or go, because I don't know until I hear.
It's a Clash song, yeah.
Till I hear what's happened. I know Mr. Federico's on that for us, so he can tell us.
Would you like to make a motion for discussion?
Yes, that'd be great.
All
So
right, I'll second the motion for discussion. Mr. Federico.
I will tell you what I know. I reported back to the council, I think it was the first meeting in September after the trust adopted its bylaws. We had a couple meetings. Take a step back. I am on the board of directors. I represent the small cities on the Housing Finance Trust. And I was also on the bylaws subcommittee. So we worked in August to amend and recommend bylaws that were adopted at the end of August. As I reported back here, They were amended. The big change to the bylaws from what we joined back in May was that we took out the trust's ability to issue debt. The trust cannot borrow money without a bylaw change. As far as finances go, the trust has been given a grant of $5 million from the county and has $1 million earmarked from Governor Newsom's budget that the trust has gotten. It's been allocated to the trust, but the trust is working through the actual standards of, I'm sorry, staff, somebody maybe help me. You actually have to fill out some paperwork to get that money, even though it's been allocated to you from Sacramento. And in those standards will be any sort of strings that Sacramento may put on that money. And the trust is very much hoping that that money can be used for administrative costs. Most other grant money that the trust will apply for generally has a provision such that 10 to 15% of the money can be used for administrative costs. So that's very much how the trust is looking forward to funding its administrative expenses. It also is the bylaws, the JPA agreement said that the county shall provide administrative services for the first year. It doesn't say that the county can't provide those for future years. We haven't crossed that bridge yet. One thing that the county staff are working on with some of the larger cities are to try to get maybe some of the larger cities who already have housing authorities or bigger staff to provide some pro bono staff work to the trust to keep costs down, basically using other cities' staff's unallocated time. The trust, we're not quite there yet to have some more concrete decisions, and my recommendation to the council would be that we stay in the trust, and as these things develop, I will continue to report back to you, and if it looks like we're going to incur any expenses, then I would advise that we leave. One issue at the trust is obviously a big concern, financial concern for us. And the reason I got on the trust board to begin with was to make sure that that trust didn't incur pension liability. That was going to then be an anchor on us. The trust to date has hired no employees. We do have one general manager for the trust who was hired by the county as a consultant, so on a short-term basis. If the trust got to a point where it wanted to hire any employees, I would move to, one, say, let's not do that. Let's contract all the employees we can. And if the trust was set on doing it, I would say, let's do it with no pension offers. So, a part-time basis or something like that to avoid pensions. And if that wasn't okay, I'd say, well, let's do it with a defined contribution and not a defined benefit plan. And if the trust ever tried to hire an employee with a defined benefit plan, I would say, please make this effective 6 months from now so that I can go back to my council and recommend we leave the trust, because there's no reason that that trust should have to incur pension liability. Its scope is so simple and basic. We apply for funds and we screen projects and we give funds out. I just don't think hiring full-time employees is something that trust ever needs to do. If you have any more questions for me, I'd be happy to try to answer them, but that's basically where the trust is right now.
So did you make a motion in there? A substitute motion? Because I think you made a recommendation to stay in. Are you making a substitute
Oh, okay.
motion?
I moved to stay in the trust.
Okay. Mr. Wyatt. Oh, I got to hit the mic on.
Should I second that?
That'd be great.
So we can then continue to talk.
Sure.
Okay, so I will second the motion to stay in the trust. So I wanted to, add to Councilmember Federico's comments. Actually, I had a couple of incredibly exciting meetings last week, or I think one was the Friday before. But anyway, but in addition to being on the County Commission to End Homelessness, as a part of that,
I'm on the data ad hoc group working on how to put together the systems that will allow us to really effectively find the resources and work in more effectively with the homeless. But in context of here, I'm also on the housing ad hoc. And the discussion on the trust is part of, what we look at. So I think that, the trust is ultimately just trying to get its feet under it. It does have some money available to care for itself for, a bit longer. So I don't think we need to be worried at this point about having to kick in money. But what I did want to say in addition to that, and what was exciting about this was these meetings. Generally, I've been trying to deal with, figuring out how to work and resolve the homelessness issue here at Dana Point and for the county for, nearly 3 years. And the conversations are always about telling us what we can't do and why we can't do it. You can't do it this way and we can't do that. And, and it's not our responsibility. And it's, there's a finger pointing. In these last two meetings, and it didn't really hit me until I sort of got on and was sort of summing up, but these were the first meetings where we had created people who said, well, I can't quite do that because the legislature, for example, some of the state agencies doesn't allow me to do that. But we will take an action to go back. We believe we can change that. That's not, in terms of our charter and the state, we will sponsor and head legislation to allow us to change that so we can do things. And we had other groups who, when we were looking at sources of money, saying, I can't do that. But for example, the trust now is set up so it can do this, and by their charter, then they can help out in this way while we cover this part. So for the first time in every meeting, I had the groups of people representing the different agencies involved saying, okay, we can figure out how we can solve this problem, and we can divvy up the work, and we can sort of look at the capability of each of these organizations and take what we can take on and figure out how to make that work, and work with this other agency who's really chartered to take on this part. And if we can do that together, we can make some progress. So the Housing Finance Trust was one of those where we definitely defined a role for it, in that overall picture. And so giving it a little bit of time to get its feet under and working on that role was, I think we have time, and I suggest that we stay in the trust. And a year from now, we'll have to revisit that again because it'll be 6 months before our due date again. But we have another year, I think, to continue to make progress on this. So I'm optimistic that the trust, we definitely know it has a role. And there are laws that make it effective in that role where other organizations wouldn't be. And we need to find a way to make sure we can take advantage of that. So that's my input.
Ms. Lewis.
Thanks. I just had a couple questions because I read the JPA and the bylaw, but I wasn't quite sure. So so you said there's money that's been put in there. Does that get apportioned? I mean, how does it determine? Who determines where the money goes, and how does it get determined?
Mr. Federico.
The trust board of directors will come up with a budget, certainly, once we figure out what the money from Sacramento looks like and which strings are attached to it. But ultimately, all the money that's available for projects, the trust will have a subcommittee that helps prioritize projects, affordable housing projects, where the trust can make an impact, and ultimately the board of directors will vote on whether projects get funding. So, yeah.
Okay, see no further comments. Let's, we have a motion on the table to, and a second to stay in the housing trust. We'll go ahead and vote on that. All right, that passes 5-0. Thank you very much, Mr. Federico, for a very detailed explanation, and Mr. Wyatt for filling in some gaps for us and how it got there. So, that brings us to council reports, including city-related meetings. I'll just go ahead around the horn on this, Mr. Federico. Turn your mic on.
Madam Clerk, I'll turn in my list of meetings, and I don't have anything to report, but I would like to just reiterate something that Mr. Wayne Yost said earlier. I like to remind myself sometimes that our community groups here in town are one of the things that really make this place special. The Monarch Beach Sunrise Rotary with their Lobster Fest last weekend, Trunk or Treat this weekend, partnership with police services and the VFW, and then that event on Saturday, October 26th, Sir Optimist International. That's a group that improves the lives of women and girls through programs leading to social and economic empowerment. And they're having a craft fair at the community house next Saturday, 10 to 3. It's a really cool group that does some amazing things for young women and girls. So please go out there and support that if you have the time.
Ms. Lewis.
I have nothing.
Mr. Vixork.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have nothing to report. I will send my list of meetings to the clerk after the meeting.
Mayor Pro Tem Wyatt.
I have turned on in my list of meetings to the city clerk. I would like to bring up one thing. I've been working with a number of groups in the harbor on a time capsule event where we're about to put in a 50-year time capsule, and there's a gala celebration on the 28th. Which, I think it's at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm pretty sure the timing to basically unveil the overall monument for it, if you will, and put the time capsule in. So a big event. So I just want to make an announcement that the public's invited, and it should be a lot of fun. And if you can make it, it'd be worth going to. That's all I have.
Thank you. I have turned in my list of meetings. I just got that done this evening, as a matter of fact. I want to report that I was at an OC Parks meeting a couple weeks ago, and one of the hot issues were electric bikes on our trails. We do allow them on the paved trails currently. We have a speed limit of 10 miles an hour, but there's some questions on whether or not they're going to go up to the off-road trails, which they're very capable of. Yeah, that debate's going on. So if that is something you're interested in, especially living down in this area with all the steep hills and everything, it does actually help people who otherwise could not access those trails. It gives them an opportunity to get up there. So it's an interesting conversation to have on both sides on whether you agree with it or not. The Rotary was out of town for that. So I sent my wife and my son, and my kid ate 5 lobsters. It was unbelievable. I was like, best money ever spent, because I couldn't have bought 5 lobsters for what that ticket cost. So anyway, with that, I'm going to go ahead and take it over to the staff reports. Mr. Denny?
Nothing tonight, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Munoz?
For this evening.
Let me turn. Okay. That takes us to adjournment. The next regular meeting of the City Council will be November 5th, 2019 at 5 p.m. in the City Council Chamber located at 33282 Golden Lantern Suite 210, Dana Point, California. We're adjourned.